Welcome to Box Football. I have a little bit of a voice issue. I was yelling at the TV again. Do that a lot lately. Um,
Those refs are just so unfair to Manchester United, aren't they?
Listen, I can't believe that Andre Onana was fouled like that, and they didn't call a free kick. But we'll get to that later in this in the thing. There's so much stuff happened. It's only week one, and I know I'm already questioning some of my picks from last week. You see in the title there, Craps Danila, as we're calling them now. They were atrocious, and some of these games, but we'll get into all that. Stu, Mike, Kyle, what do you say hello, and what do you think about I'm Sean, by the way, Sean.
The first thing that I look at, you talked about predictions that went wrong. The key to a good pundit is not to stick to a bad take, it's to admit when you're wrong. I was wrong. Newcastle's really good. Like, Kyle, it's impossible to think of how that day could have gone better for them and worse for Villa.
We'll get to that in a moment, but we've got a lot to talk about, guys. It was quite the opening weekend of Premier League football. Just remember to follow us on Twitter, Box to Box Football, on Instagram, on your podcast feeds, wherever you guys may get those. Make sure you check us out, Box to Box Football. But let's get it started. We'll get right into it, guys. Starting with Liverpool won, Chelsea won at Stamford Bridge. There was drama on and off the pitch in this one. Luis Diaz gives the visitors a 1-0 lead. Mo Salah thought he had made it 2-0, only to be brought back by VAR. Chelsea equalized through Axel Disasi. You're going to have to put a phonetic pronunciation in there for me. Disasi on that one. Ben Chilwell also had a goal called back later. So as it stands, it finishes 1-1, the seventh straight draw between those two teams. And then, of course, we have all the other stuff going on. You had Mo Salah storming off the pitch in disgust after he was subbed off, not even looking at Jurgen Klopp. And then the transfer stuff off the field with Caicedo and Lavia both heading now to Chelsea, when at one time we thought they were both going to Liverpool. Just a lot to dissect and digest there. And we'll open it up. We'll start with you, Stu, on this game.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely two separate stories here, right? The game and the whole transfer window saga. I mean, I guess we'll start from the game perspective. The first 15 minutes, Liverpool looked pretty good, right? They were moving the ball up. They were pressing, had a bit of a tempo to them. You kind of saw the reason they brought in McAllister and Szoboszlai. But then you got to a point about 20 minutes into the game where it just fell off a cliff. They stopped pressing. They weren't able to get any pressure. Enzo Hernandez just was popping balls over the top to Reece James. The defense was kind of left out to dry. And, I mean, that's kind of what you get, right? You're playing McAllister as a 6. You're playing you're just playing Gakpo in the midfield. It's just not their best lineup. And it's just really – it puts so much stress on the defense to the point where – it could have been 2-3-1 Chelsea. Honestly, kind of fortunate for Liverpool that they didn't lose that. A point probably was fortunate. Chelsea probably deserved the 3 points, if I'm being honest. But again, just the midfield issues that were there last year, they're different because it's not just old legs now. It's just guys that are out of position and they're not enough bodies. So for me, it's just kind of a disheartening past 72 hours when I thought they had Caicedo and maybe someone else coming in. Now you have none of those guys. Where they go from here, I don't know. And they don't need one guy. They don't need two guys. They probably need three guys to compete. And for me, it's just not good enough.
I mean, I'll be honest. If Salah scores, I think Liverpool wins that game easily. If that goal count, and it was marginal, it was really, really close. If he's whatever, half a foot back. I mean, it's 2-0, and I think they probably go on and win pretty easily. Maybe 3-0. I mean, they would have probably had Chelsea would have been open. The first, I mean, it was a pretty open game. The first half, it was an interesting watch for two teams I don't really care for, but I don't. know if either of those teams are good enough to finish in the top four. I originally I said Liverpool with Caicedo because I think he solves a little problems or Lavia, but if they don't get either of them and they don't solve that problem, like look, Trent isn't a midfielder. I know they want to put him in midfield, and instead of putting him out in the right where he actually affects games, and Gakpo's not a midfield. They brought him in to score goals. Darwin Nunez needs to be on the pitch. He can't be if they spend $100 million on him and he's not going to be on the pitch in a game like that. It's just tough. But Chelsea, Caicedo and Levy are going to help, but their midfield. Conor Gallagher is not a defensive midfielder, but once again, who's going to score a goal for them? So, if Chelsea goes out and spends another, at this point now, you might as well spend $150 million on Osimhen. And just spend $1 billion in the last 12 months and just complete the job. They're going to be. You got to imagine they're going to get sanctioned at some point. But I think Chelsea going forward has a chance to maybe be something with these guys coming in because he's a very good player. But until they get something that can put the ball in the net, it's I'm not sure how good they're going to be.
Let me recap the transfer drama that went on between these two clubs, and then we'll get the mic and let you get on this. But basically, what we had going on was Liverpool thought it had a deal done with Moises Caicedo. It had agreed to a fee with Brighton for about £107 million. Looked like it was going to go down, and then at the 11th hour, Caicedo says, "Nope, I'm not going to Liverpool. I'm only going to play for Chelsea." Now, in the meantime, Chelsea had agreed to trigger the release clause on Tyler Adams, the American midfielder from Leeds. Adams comes into Chelsea, goes through and gets the medical, but then on to Chelsea. So now Chelsea needs to up its bid to beat out that number that Liverpool submits. Chelsea backs out of the Adams deal despite the medical having been done, perhaps also leaking that they think he's going to be injured for another 4 months to kind of give them cover. They bid about £115 million to bring in Caicedo, who's now on his way to Chelsea. Then at the same time, the next day, it comes out that Romeo Lavia from Southampton also prefers Chelsea to Liverpool. Both clubs were in on him. About $60 million. He's going to head to Chelsea. So the Blues get 2 midfielders. Liverpool gets none. Tyler Adams now appears like he may be headed to Bournemouth. But as we know, nothing is done until it's signed on the dotted line. Did you follow all of that? Because it might give you a headache trying to keep track of all of that. Mike, go ahead. Your thoughts.
With the exception of losing that game 4-5-0, it's hard to imagine this weekend having gone worse for Liverpool, because it wasn't just a draw, it was embarrassment. Like, say what you want about Man United, we'll get to them in a little bit. Was that result, it was a win, but was it a little bit disappointing? Was it underwhelming for a couple other clubs we'll talk about? But Liverpool got embarrassed this weekend, and it really kind of shines that light and puts that pressure back on Fenway Sports Group to me, because this is already a Liverpool fan base that's been disenchanted with the board for a little while, and now it's just, this Lavia deal should have been done in the middle of July, but they were heckling and huffing and puffing over nickels. Just get the deal done. That's what you see with Chelsea. They went out, they want a guy, they get the deal done. You see it with Arsenal. They want a guy, they go out, they do it, they get the deal done. And Liverpool is still just kind of playing this haggling game, and it's not going to work. And Sean, I'm with you. We both had them in Champions League.
Yeah.
And there were some impressive teams this weekend, Liverpool not being one of them. Liverpool, as you said, Stu, could have very easily lost that game. And so just a disappointing weekend for Liverpool, and they have 16 days to figure out something. But they need to figure out something.
Here's the problem now. if you're a club now somewhere else, Liverpool's got $110 million, 110 million pounds. They're just going to throw 110 million at Caicedo. They're just going to throw 50 million or 55 million at Lavia. They have money to spend. They need players to come in. If I don't know, Bayern Munich and, Kimmich is there. Like, all right, give me 65 million for, that's the problem but at this point now, you can't, this is, it's funny watching this because this is what Manchester United used to do. Like they'd penny pinch and then all of a sudden they would like throw crazy money in the last like 10 days of the window and they ended up with like, Falcao or whoever. United got some deals done early in the market and they're like, oh, listen, we don't have a lot of money, financial fair play, blah, blah, blah. You can't really go, we're not going to pay. And then all of a sudden, so these teams were like, it's not the Manchester United where you're like, oh, we have all this money to spend. Now, Liverpool's in that same boat where they have to get better. They can't go into the season with the team they are. So they're going to spend money. Who are they going to buy? I don't know. They're going to buy somebody. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they buy Tyler Adams now. Maybe they're going to buy somebody. There's players available, but if I'm, West Ham or whoever, and then you want, Lucas Paqueta or whoever you want, it's going to cost you extra now because I know you have it.
Stu, last word on Liverpool.
Yeah, it's just, and like Sean mentioned, the teams know that the money is there to spend. There's not a huge amount of guys left. We have 15 days. How many guys are really truly up for sale? A lot of these teams probably feel like they have their teams in order. They don't maybe not want to sell. And then the desperation, there's going to be a tax, whether it's an extra 10%, 20%, whatever it is. For me, when they lost Caicedo and Lavia, to me, the idea of competing with an Arsenal United for top three, that's gone. That's out the window. I think now their best case scenario is fourth, but a more likely scenario is, again, fifth or sixth. I just don't see this team. And this team has talent. We've been through all the talent they have, but there's just such a hole in that defensive midfield spot. And then it just puts such a stress on the defense that last year was very underwhelming. And we even saw yesterday, it's underwhelming. Robertson's kind of playing out of position. He's a guy who's more of an offensive fullback, and he's being asked to be kind of like a third center back. Alexander-Arnold's in the midfield. So that left side is always wide open. It just puts so much stress on Van Dijk and Konate. And if one of those guys go down, then you're putting that stress on Joe Gomez or Joel Matip, who at this point, they can't really do that.
Just real quickly too, if I was Liverpool at this point, I know it's first week, let's not go crazy, but I would probably put a little more stake into the Europa League at this point, because if you win the Europa League, you can get into the Champions League, and they could win the Europa League or go deep because their squad is good enough to compete. So I think, maybe they have to take that competition a little more seriously. Obviously, September, October, November.
And quickly here, just very, very last point, Kyle, and then we'll move on to the last thing. Remember, deadline day, the Casemiro deal came out of nowhere. So things can happen.
Yep.
Now let's talk maybe the big winner of this opening weekend, Newcastle, a 5-1 thrashing of Aston Villa. Sandro Tonali, who apparently does want to be there after all, opens the scoring in the 6th minute. Aston Villa did level that match at 1-1, but from that point on, man, it was all Newcastle. Alexander Isak was on target twice for a 3-1 lead. Callum Wilson made it 4, and then Harvey Barnes, who came in from Leicester City over the summer, in stoppage time, makes it 5-1. Newcastle really laid down a marker. Aston Villa, not so good. They lost Emi Buendia during the week to an ACL injury. Tyrone Mings is going to be out 4 to 6 months with a knee injury. So I guess we're, Newcastle, title contender. Too early to say after week 1. And were we all wrong about Newcastle? Aston Villa. Some of us had them in the top 4.
Look, first of all, so Newcastle plays City this week, so we'll see there. Sometimes when you have an injury like that to a guy that's a leader and's been there for a long time, and it's bad. Like we talk about the Arsenal in a little bit. Like Timber tried to go back out there and play, but you knew it was bad. Like, you knew it was a knee injury. When Mings is going off like that, and he's like crying, carrying up in a stretcher, and he's like your guy, like he's kind of one of your leaders. It's just tough. I mean, you're in the locker room, you're like, what the heck? Like, this is second ACL in like a couple days. I just think sometimes you have a tendency to just see it just go to pieces. I didn't know if it was going to go to pieces like that. Newcastle is clearly a better team now. Down the road, if they play again, I don't know if it'll be 5-1 again, but I think they took advantage. Maybe Aston Villa came out flat after halftime, because I thought Aston Villa played pretty well in the first half. It was a pretty open game, and then the second half they were just destroyed and they were flat and they just gave up. I thought they gave up a little bit. I mean, late in the game, you can't be giving up goals and in 90+1 when you're down 4-1. I mean, that's just lack of effort at that point. But Harvey Barnes, Mike, you talked about it. I mean, he's going to be big for them, I think. Isak is, I'm in my fantasy team. He's going to score a ton of goals. They're clearly a top 3, top 2 kind of team. Are they better than an Arsenal? Maybe. Are they as good as Manchester City? I don't know. We'll have to see. But they're going to be there. They'll be top 4. I'm going to just amend my statement there. They will replace Liverpool in my top 4.
Mike, anything to add?
I think Mike's muted.
Sorry, my bad. 3, 2, 1. I can't add anything to what Sean said. I mean, nailed it. I think Isak kind of has that Bukayo Saka potential of last year, where that guy who goes from could be a star to star. He was spectacular in that game. Former Fox's report, Harvey Barnes was great. He had a huge impact, as did Anthony Gordon. Both the left side wingers for Newcastle, I felt, looked great in that game. Yuri Tielemans did nothing once he came into that game, did not boss midfield at all, barely had any possession. I'm not willing to go so far as to say I was wrong about Aston Villa. I just think it was a day from hell. And in almost a weird way, I know this is going to sound harsh, but Pau Torres replacing Tyrone Mings might be better in the long term. Pau Torres is a really quality player. And when he finds his way in the Premier League, I think he's going to be really good. I just think it was a day from hell for Aston Villa. I'm a little more willing to write that one off, but I'm absolutely writing off what I said about Newcastle. Top 3, cannot wait to see them play City this week.
Aston Villa's got Everton this week. I think they need a bounce. Obviously, they need a bounce back performance. But yeah, no, I think they just they got, like Sean said, they got run over in the second half. And Newcastle was just rampant. Great performance at home, fired up in front of the home crowd. Look, and I think that's got something to do with it too when you're talking about season openers. But I thought Newcastle was fantastic. Laid down a marker that this is not going to be sort of a one-hit wonder in terms of the Champions League. They're going to be a player from here moving forward for those spots. Can they contend for the title when you consider in now you've got the European football? I don't know. It's hard to make judgments off of one game. But again, super impressed with Newcastle, and Aston Villa needs to kind of regroup here and get its stuff back together. Stu, anything you want to last word on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And for Newcastle, I'm kind of with you guys. I picked Liverpool to finish 4th. I think Newcastle is that team that I think jumps back and finishes at least 4th, maybe 3rd. They are that good. I still think they might be a little weak in the midfield, but again, you got a pretty good debut from Tonali. You got the goal. But at the same time, I still think they're going to spend, whether it's the end of this window or in the winter window. I think they will bring someone in, and since they're going to do that, it's hard to really pick against this team because I think they are that good and that strong of a squad.
Moving on now to the 2 clubs that I think most people have as 1-2 in their predictions, and that's Manchester City and Arsenal. City opens the season on the road at Burnley. Pretty comprehensive 3-0 win. Erling Haaland gets him started with his first touch of the game in the 4th minute. Scores again in the 36th. I think he had 4 touches by that point. It had 2 goals. And then Rodri finishes the scoring in the 75th. Meanwhile, Arsenal at the Emirates against Nottingham Forest, 79% of the possession. Eddie Nketiah gets him off to the lead with a slight deflection that takes it past Matt Turner. Saka with an absolutely wonderful goal, world-class goal of the first week of the season. Benz went in. Although Forest, Drew Awoni in the 82nd minute on a nice counterattack, gets one back and makes that an interesting, final 8 minutes. Arsenal lost Jurrien Timber to a significant knee injury. I think it's an ACL. He was a new signing from Ajax. He went right into the starting lineup. That obviously is going to hurt them. I don't see. Look, City did its thing, just kind of controlled that game. Was never really threatened by Burnley. The thing with the Arsenal game is Arsenal goes up 2-0 there, and I thought then Arsenal had a chance to really put its foot on the gas and put that game away and go seeking that third goal that would have killed it off. And maybe they took the foot off the gas a little bit because they had that 79% possession. They were in control of that game. Nottingham Forest was obviously content there to try and sit in with all 11 guys behind the ball. But then, Forest makes some substitutions. They bring on some more dynamic players, and they score on that counterattack. And now all of a sudden, Arsenal is kind of holding on a little bit there. I would have liked to just see a little bit more of a killer instinct for them to go get that third goal. But at the end of the day, it's the 3 points they needed. They keep pace with City. You don't want to be kind of falling behind them early. So it's job done by both sides. Mike, go ahead.
I liked what I saw from Arsenal. I think, like you said, though, they need a little bit more of a killer instinct, particularly from that center forward position. I know Nketiah got a goal. I'm not going to sit here and rip Nketiah for not being good enough. He is what he is. I would be interested in seeing Balogun get a look there before Jesus got healthy. I would be curious if Arsenal pokes around in the window just a little bit to see for that center forward position, because I thought that felt a bit lacking in that game. But yeah, dominated possession, kind of a comfortable 2-1 win. I didn't see holding on at the end as much. I mean, yeah, Nottingham Forest got one back. They'll be feisty. They'll be fine this year. I was impressed with Arsenal, but Man City completely blew Burnley away and threw a lot of cold water on some of the excitement about Burnley coming into the league. And I think what we saw there from week 1 is that not so much down on Burnley, but that Arsenal need better center forward play if they're going to compete with City.
Ron?
Look, I mean, if you've Arsenal did this 100 times last year. They were up 2. Arsenal was one of the best all year, the best first half teams in the league, in the world. Every game 2-0. But when you watch them, when they start, obviously usually their collapse used to happen, when they were actually good, like in the mid, from 2010 to 2015, like their collapse used to happen in like February and March. It happened a little bit later, but they had that 2-0 lead, and then all of a sudden they gave up a goal, and it was like a little shaky, and they couldn't hold on to the lead. It happened a lot last year. So, to hold on, that I thought that was pretty impressive. But, once again, it's Nottingham Forest at home. You should win that game. I think losing Timber is going to hurt because, they haven't brought a lot of players in yet. I mean, they've brought some very good players in, but, now does Arsenal have to decide, well, we do need help at the 9, but we clearly identified Timber as someone that we needed to bring in because we needed to shore up the defense. Now he's out for the year now, and we're in the Champions League. Do we have to go out and, get somebody, a cheaper alternative, obviously, because Timber's going to be there for a while to kind of, or do they kind of patch it together? What are they going to do there? Like, if you ask me right now, of the team, I think Newcastle is probably better than Arsenal. Look, one game, obviously, but I think Arsenal in some of these games, I just think it's like they make it dodgy. It's 2-0. Go get the third goal, end the game, and they don't do that enough. And until they start doing that, they're not going to win trophies because you have to, They were clear at the end of the season last year, and then just couldn't end those games. The Southampton game comes to mind. Some of these other games they kind of should have put away, but City's, Holling's going to score. If he stays healthy, he's going to score 30 goals, 35, whatever he wants to score. So it's crazy. He'll score. He kills the bad teams.
Yeah. By the way, City Newcastle next week too.
Yeah. You got something, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like with City especially, how about Rodri? I mean, just another incredible performance. He saved the goal. I know there was one play, I believe it was in the first half, where Akanji slipped. He picked up the goal, got an assist, 97% pass accuracy for the game, 5 tackles. He had 3 shots. If you're looking for guys to step up with Gundogan now gone at Barcelona, and now you have De Bruyne, who's probably going to miss a few weeks, at least with a hamstring injury. They need someone in that midfield to step up. And you have Rodri, who I think is good enough to do that. You saw him score the goal in the Champions League final, and it's just really got it stepped up for them in the past couple of years. So for me, a shout out to him because he played a great game and saved at least a goal, Mike.
Particularly here at the end of the window with De Bruyne getting hurt, I would say watch City. Whether it's Paquetá or Olise, it feels like they're probably going to get a pretty decent-sized piece of business done here in the midfield before the end of the window to make them even better if such a thing is possible.
Right on to the game we just watched wrap up a few hours ago. Manchester United won, Wolves 0 at Old Trafford. Rafael Varane heads in the 76th minute, and then United gets a little help from referee Simon Hooper and VAR after they somehow conspire to not award a penalty after Andre Onana just clatters into a Wolves player trying to claim a cross. Gary O'Neill went ballistic on the Wolves bench, and certainly you can't blame him for that. You watch that, and for me, that's a penalty all day, every day. Sean, penalty or no penalty?
Tim Howard said it wasn't a penalty, and
Tim Howard's a goalkeeper, though.
They never.
His opinion doesn't count on that.
If it's a penalty, like here's the deal, like did he foul him? Probably, but they never call that. It never gets called. The goalkeepers can do whatever they want. They can murder people in the box. It never gets called.
If that was in the field of play,
and
an outfield player did that, that would be a penalty.
What happened?
If an outfield player made that challenge, it didn't get the ball.
But what about
penalty?
What about the Fulham Everton goal that was disallowed? The Everton the keeper fouled his own. He was fouled by his own player. Like the keeper is the most protected person on that. They can kill people and it doesn't get called. Is it they can, and then whatever, they can do all this stuff that they want about, like, oh, sorry about this and give the call in the morning, whatever. And that stuff is stupid. Like at that point, nobody wants a call in the morning. Everybody knows the deal. Like just leave it and just go to the next week. The thing I will say is when Manchester United plays, everyone was like, oh, we play Wolves first match. Wolves are struggling. And I'm just like Wolves. When you look at the last 10 times, I was talking pre-show, they played Wolves, I think it was 2021, like 3 times in 17 days, or it might not even have been 17 days. It was an FA Cup replay, and the league. And there was 2 total goals scored in like 100 and I don't even know. It was maybe 200 and some minutes. Like every time Manchester United plays Wolves, it's the worst game of all time. We can never, and we just find some way to like kick the ball in the net. It was a great goal. I mean, Wan-Bissaka getting wide, I thought he was very good, and then Varane staying up. Their forwards were terrible. They just Mason Mount wasn't good. Look, it's the first game, can't overreact. It's 3 points. Did they steal one? Yeah, probably. I thought, if Wolves could have had anybody up front that could score, they probably would have lost the game, but that's why they're Wolves. Like if they were good, they would have somebody who could score goals.
That's why Wolves is going to be in a relegation scrap.
I think Højlund will help them. Obviously, they have to have a 9. You can't have Rashford playing 9. Rashford wants to play out in the left. Sancho, I thought, was good when he came out. They got to get They need a couple midfielders. They have some help coming in. They have a midfielder coming in, maybe two, maybe a center back coming in when all these sales are completed. So they'll get some help, but they have a pretty tough schedule coming up. So, they have to pick it up. But, it was an interesting game. But look, Wolves, as long as you get 3 points against Wolves, I don't even care.
Sean, if Jose Sa did that to Marcus Rashford in the same spot in the game, would Bruno Fernandes be on the penalty spot?
I don't know. At Old Trafford?
The answer is yes.
Yeah, of course, probably.
Then what else is there to say?
No, look, it's never going to get called. Like, would I want it called? Of course. But, like, it's just the goalkeepers they don't call it. Like, in that game, once again, in that Fulham Everton.
They don't call it on certain teams. It's not that they don't call it.
Called. I've never seen that called against anybody. Like, they never give that. The goalkeeper is the most. David De Gea used to just get like fingertip touch and fall back, and they give a foul. I'm just like, you're just yelling at him to get up. Like, it's just crazy. You can't touch him. But
But the goalkeeper delivered the blow in this.
Oh, yeah.
In this instance, it wasn't the offensive player in a 50-50 colliding with the goal. The goalkeeper delivered the blow in this.
I don't understand. But if it was, then why? I don't understand. Like, why didn't they send the key? Like, VAR looked at it. Like, they didn't even send him over to the monitor.
They should have, and it should have been a penalty and a yellow card on Onana. That would have been the correct.
They didn't even send him to the monitor.
I know, but if he would have called that, first of all, he's got to get that right on the field. Like, he's got to make the penalty decision on the field and get the call.
It's tough
right
though there
the
because
field.
you don't know if his own because the two players were the two Wolves players were like this and Onana came in. So if you call that and it's the two Wolves players that hit, like it's tough to call that. Like if he calls that
on the field, it probably stays a penalty.
Yeah, but
right? Even with VAR, because they're not gonna overturn.
It's never gonna
that call on the field. If he calls that on the field, I don't know that they're going to overturn that on VAR.
Probably. I don't know. They probably they don't overturn a lot of stuff. But yeah, I just it's tough to call that on the field.
I despise when a penalty either is or isn't a penalty based on where you're playing and who you're playing. It's either a penalty or it's not. If Sa does that, Fernandes is on the spot. But because it happened to Wolves, then 1-0, tough luck, and you'll hear from the director officiating on Tuesday, and they'll rescind O'Neill's card. Those points are valuable to a team like Wolves. That's tough. That's tough.
Which, by the way, won't make anybody feel any better because actually I thought it was a really good performance from Wolves, given everything that they've been through this week with the managerial change. And right, you're going through preseason with one manager and one system, and then 3 days before the season starts, he's gone, somebody else is in. I actually thought that was a really good performance from Wolves today. Now, can they sustain that kind of performance throughout the year? I don't know, but I thought for a first game, I thought Wolves did a lot of really good things today. They created a bunch of chances, had Manchester United under pressure at the end of the game, a little better finishing, and they're at least getting a point out of that. And if Wolves would have taken a point from that, I don't think you could sit up here and say they didn't deserve it.
Great, no beat them 5-0 next week.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a great performance by Wolves. 23 shots, which was the third most of the match week. And then Kuna in the midfield, there were a few times where he kind of just carved through the midfield. You could tell, the midfield didn't play great. Mount, like Sean said, a bit of a rough start, but yeah, for me, Kuna looked great, and I'm kind of maybe again, you try not to overreact to one game. I'm really trying not to do that, but maybe having them 18th was a bit low. Maybe this team, if they can provide some goals and get those, the shots in the net, they can maybe be a team that avoids being 19th, 18th, and can stay up.
Why don't you buy him?
I say give me another. Was it August? I don't know. Give me to the end of October before I, maybe go back and look at my table and revise, and might do some more, crossing out and moving teams up and around. Let's give it 2 months to see where we're at the end of 2 months. I actually wanted to run down some of the other results from the weekend. Tottenham starts the post Harry Kane era with a 2-2 draw against Brentford Ange ball, as they're calling it. It's wide open. A lot of chances on both ends for both teams. At the end of the day, they share the points. Brighton, a 4-1 winner over Luton Town. In Luton's Premier League debut, that looks like a team that's getting relegated. Fulham 1-0 over Everton. Bobby De Crediva scores in the 73rd minute. Fulham gets 3 points on the road, and the goalkeeper Bernd Leno comes up with a bunch of huge saves in that one. Crystal Palace starts with a 1-0 win over promoted Sheffield United. Edson Edward in the 49th minute, and then Bournemouth 1-1 with West Ham. Jared Bowen gave the Hammers the lead. Dominic Solanke equalized in the 82nd minute for the Cherries. Again, it looks like Bournemouth's on the verge of acquiring Tyler Adams from Leeds. Anything from those games that stood out to you guys?
That if you play Ange ball against Man City, you're losing 9-1.
They have some good players, but man, you can't. As soon as first of all, they were talking before the game, and they're like, I forget who ref the game, and they're like, he gave the most penalties in the Premier League last year in the games. I'm like, oh man, there's going to be crazy goals in the first half. It's definitely over 2.5. And I'm looking, I'm just like, I was 4-4. They had penalties all over the place, and he's given a penalty early in the game. The other thing was the cards in these games. The cards are going crazy. They're giving out cards like crazy for time wasting and throw-ins and all this stuff. But I thought Brentford played pretty well. Came back a couple times. Before halftime. Thought it was anybody's game. The game kind of died off in the second half. The first half was really enjoyable. I thought Fulham, that's a big win for them. Everton under pressure already, getting booed at home. Bournemouth, West Ham, it was all right. I was watching a little bit of that. And obviously in Brighton, Evan Ferguson's going to be starting for that team really quickly. He's 18, 19 years old. They're going to lose. Obviously Caicedo is gone. They will reinvest that money and they will be just fine. Luton Town's atrocious. Sheffield United's atrocious. I see no way for them to stay up. They're both terrible. Crystal Palace, I thought, it'd be interesting if Elise stays. I think they're an enjoyable team to watch. I actually like watching them play when they're, as a neutral. I usually watch them because I like the way they kind of attack. So, pretty interesting games.
I guess I'll say a word about Fulham, or else why else would I be on this podcast? But no, look, I was pleased to get 3 points. 3 points on the road is great anytime you can get it in the Premier League. I actually thought Everton outplayed Fulham for long stretches in that game. But look, that Marco Silva made the right changes when he had to. He didn't start with some of his big guns, but then he brought Pereira off the bench. He brought Mitrovic off the bench. De Cordova came in off the bench, and it was those three players that ended up linking for the goal. Fulham was able to produce the one moment of quality when it had to, and then certainly I thought Bernd Leno had a big game in goal, and some of that was down to the fact that Neal Maupay just kept hitting him with the ball when from point blank range. But what are you going to do? You still got to make the save. But 3 points away from home is a great way to start the season, especially with a derby against Brentford coming up next week. Stu, I know Stu had a point on Everton he wanted to make.
Yeah, it's just Neal Maupay was kind of where I was going with that. He's not good. We talk about all these guys from Brighton who have turned out to be good players or sold for big fees, and Neal Maupay is just like the opposite. I think you saw that he has one goal the past year, which is pretty amazing. Just for Everton under Dyche, they're just going to struggle to get goals. I know they're trying to bring in Jack Harrison. Not sure if that's done. And they still have McNeil out, Calvert-Lewin's still out. So if you're relying on Maupay and Jack Harrison to score you goals, it's going to be a rough go for those guys the rest of the year. I know Mike.
And by the way, Tarkowski backed into Bernd Leno on that play. That's why it was a foul.
I think that one of the things I want to see how they perform in Europe, but what seemed clear is Brighton's kind of the class of the mid table. They looked really, really good in that game, and I
I
think if
think the
they
opponent.
can,
I think the opponent had something to do with that as well.
I agree, but that also kind of brings me to my point about why I'm kind of willing to say I think Wolves are going to be okay compared to an Everton or something like that, because there's one relegation spot on the line this year. Sheffield and Luton are going down.
And look, they were the
There's
odds-on
one
favorite
spot.
to go down. Yeah, watching the first week, it did make me feel like, okay, those two teams are probably going to be in the bottom three. Let's avoid trying to be 18th if you're one of the other 11 clubs who might be in that mix.
And I mean, Luton's talking about bringing in Tim Krul. Like, that's what's going to fix them. I'm not so optimistic about that. Luton has a championship roster. Sheffield has a championship roster. They sold Sander Berg, who was a good player. They went out and they got a nice midfielder in Gustavo Hammer, but they bought him from Coventry. He's a championship player.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's been a little chatter around Amadou Onana, the Everton player, maybe going to United, and then United sending some players to Everton. Maybe some cash too. Maybe if they send Anthony Martial over there, maybe he could do something. I mean, send some. Everton's not. It's like I just their squad isn't terrible. You just don't know. Like, Jack Harrison is on the roster now for Everton, by the way. So, at some point you think they're going to click, but they just don't ever do it. So I don't know. You are what we say you are. Your record says you are, and stuff like that. From the other football. So I don't know. I think they're going to be all right, but. They got to start picking up some points. We talked about this. If they don't get some points early on, they're going to be in a lot of trouble.
All right, I now want to go to a segment that we're going to wrap our show up with called Around the World, where we look at all kinds of different soccer news. But I want to start with Mike, our championship correspondent, and let him give a word on what's going on in the second division.
Leicester looked pretty good this week again. Neil Warnock had Huddersfield fighting in that game. It was a Neil Warnock special, that game. But Leicester City with Mavididi got the goal. They're at the top of the table with Ipswich, which is what I think the top of the table in the championship is going to look like most of the year. You had an absolute shootout 4-4 between Norwich and Southampton. Neither of those teams can play an ounce of defense. I think Coventry is going to be pretty hurt by the loss of Gustavo Hammer. From that team that went to the final last year, they lost probably their two best players in Gio Karras and Hammer. So I think they're going to fall down the table a little bit. But I think what you see at the top of the championship right now is actually what you're going to see. I think you're going to see Leicester and Ipswich in those top two spots for probably a majority of the season.
By the way, Leeds stinks.
Yeah, they do.
Get out of there, Tyler. Run, Tyler. Run. Get out of there. And don't go back.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't even know they won that game, Mike. I was watching that game, and it was just like nothing happened in the whole game. I guess they must have scored pretty late. Yeah, I turned it off in like the 65th, 70th minute, something like that. So I just missed the goal.
Huddersfield was doing everything they could to try and get a point out of that game. Leicester's going to have to play that exact game a lot this season because they're going to get everyone's best. And with Enzo ball, if you will, they're going to dominate a majority of possession against those teams. So it's going to be facing a lot of 11 behind the ball, pack it in. Leicester's going to have to create some opportunities. They found a way.
Over in France, where the league season also started this week, it looks like Neymar is on his way. Neymar is on his way to Saudi Arabia. He's the latest one to take the Saudi bag, and it does look like Mbappe is going to stay at PSG. I know there was the huge offer from Saudi Arabia that he turned down. There are some links from other parts of the globe. One of the things is that he's a free agent. He was going to be a free agent at the end of this season. So I think what he wanted was he just wanted to let his contract expire. He was going to play out the year at PSG and then sign for Real Madrid in the summer. And PSG was like, no, we're not going to let you do that. And that's where this standoff came from. And if they do, in fact, agree to some kind of contract extension, that will at least give PSG the opportunity to sell him for a fee in the summer to Real Madrid. I think that's what we're going to end up looking at. Sean?
Yeah.
Have you? Gotcha.
Ikatike is going to go. I mean, they're already starting to sell. I mean, PSG wants to switch the team up. They want to kind of rebuild. So, but what were you going to say?
I'm sure we're all familiar with the one relationship that keeps breaking up and getting back together, and each person would benefit from just moving to different sides of the earth.
Yeah.
That's Mbappe and PSG right
that's
now.
Probably they
that
should probably make the
unhealthy relationship.
They should probably make that deal now, right?
He should have
just make the deal with Real Madrid now.
I mean, the only reason he stayed at PSG 2 years ago is because PSG gave him like 400 million euros. Like
right.
It was crazy. Like you can't turn. If someone hands you a check for 400 million euros and say just stay like 2 more years or 3, whatever it is, no one in the world is turning. I mean, you see that what's going on with Saudi Arabia now. So like he didn't really want to stay. He's got Real Madrid posters all over his wall since he's been like 8 years old. He wants to go to Real Madrid. Real Madrid wants him. Real Madrid has already said, listen, what do you want us to pay for him this summer? We'll hand you a check. Because if you watch Barcelona yesterday, that league is wide open, and the Champions League I think is wide open. You know, if Mbappe goes to Real Madrid, they have a chance to win everything.
PSG is not winning the Champions League this year.
No, PSG's look. I'll be honest. Like PSG might not even win Ligue 1. Like I don't know. They won it by a point last year. Like Lens took them to the last day, or really to the second to last day because they had a 4-point lead. But I think it's like PSG doesn't want to lose face. I don't know what the deal is, but just get rid, just sell them, get some money.
It's not irrelevant, I don't think, that Real Madrid hasn't assigned number 9 this season yet.
Yeah.
I don't think that's irrelevant.
They're waiting. I mean, it's like, it's, August 14th, 17 days from now, or whenever the window closes. I think it's 17 days. Could he go? Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff. Could he stay? Yeah. Well, he'll be there in 2024.
Right. And I think that's what a restructured contract can at least allow PSG to maybe get a little bit more. I mean, get a little bit more for Mbappe. Like they're not going to pay for him, but if he doesn't sign a contract and then he's a free agent, he walks away and you get nothing for arguably the best player in the world, which I don't think PSG wants. I think PSG, if he's going to go to Madrid, would prefer to get a fee for him. And just lastly, one last thing, I want to wrap up with something closer to home for a lot of us, and that is Leo Messi is in Philadelphia this week for a game in the Leagues Cup semifinal. Inter Miami is at the Philadelphia Union. If you don't know what the Leagues Cup is, let me give you a quick rundown. It's basically a competition where MLS and Liga MX, the league in Mexico, got together and decided they needed some more cash. So they created this competition with all the teams in the league, where they put them in groups, and then the top 2 teams of each group of 3 comes out. And now they're at the semifinal stage. It's Inter Miami against the Philadelphia Union, and then the other semifinal, it has Monterrey against Nashville. And then the 2 winners will actually meet for a spot in the CONCACAF Champions League, plus a whole bunch of cash that you get to give for your club. But this game here is going to be played at Subaru Park. It's actually in Chester, which is just outside the Philadelphia proper here at the Union's 18,000 seat stadium. Hottest ticket in town. Those tickets were going for $350, standing room only as of today on the secondary market. And those tickets sold out in about 8 minutes. So that's been the Messi effect here in America. Inter Miami tickets were just flying off the roof. You couldn't even get in there. It was $500 a pop to go see a game down in South Florida. They had to add a stand to the stadium there. So again, just such a global superstar, such an impact, and it's coming here to the Philadelphia area. So it'll be neat for the people that have a chance to go down and get a chance to see Messi. There's a little bit of talk about whether they should have played that game at the Link. The Link is the Eagle Stadium, which holds 60,000 people, and obviously would have given the Union a chance to make a few extra $1 million through ticket sales. But at the end of the day, because this is a semifinal where there's a Champions League berth on the line, you want to have that competitive advantage. And the Union have only lost one league home game in the last 2 years. So that could be a great equalizer. The Miami defense is still not great, even with the addition of Messi. So you can get at them in the counterattack, but definitely looking forward to seeing that.
And there's another big game on Wednesday. It's interesting. The UEFA Super Cup is Wednesday, which is the winner of the Champions League, obviously, and the Europa League. Now, you'd think over, if I asked you over the last, 10 years, who's won the playoff between the cup between the Champions League winner and the Europa League winner, who would you say? I mean, you'd probably say it's pretty easily the Champions League, the best team in the world, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, they've won it, but 7 of the last 10 games have gone to added extra time. So last year was really probably the easiest game of them all. Real Madrid beat Eintracht Frankfurt 2-0. It wasn't really that close of a game. It's weird. Some of these teams take this game a little more seriously than others do. I think, Sevilla's been in it about 50 times. They lost in 2020 to Bayern Munich and added extra time. They lost in 2016 to Real Madrid and added extra time. They lost in 2015 to Barcelona 5-4 and added extra time. They lost in 2014 to Real Madrid 2-0. So they actually won it in 2006. They beat Barcelona, but so I think they take this game pretty seriously. It's a European trophy. However, Manchester City doesn't have a lot of European heritage. Obviously, they just won their first Champions League. I think Manchester City is probably going to take this game pretty seriously. I think Pep probably takes. I know he didn't really take the charity, the Community Shield very seriously.
That doesn't count. It doesn't count.
But Arsenal thinks it's a trophy. So I mean, Pep doesn't usually take these games like. So I'll be interested because City's a huge, heavy favorite, and they really should win. But Sevilla plays well, so everyone thinks this game is usually pretty easy for the Champions League winner. They usually do win. They come out ahead. They've won. They've won all those games in extra time, except for Atletico Madrid in 2018. That's the only time the winner of the Europa League has won. But I think it'll be interesting to see, how City plays in that game.
Yeah, Sevilla's going to give them hell for sure.
I think it's going to be an interesting game. But yeah, I mean, other than that, we got the games coming up on the week. There's some Champions League games midweek. I think we're not yet, we're close to getting our draw, but that's a couple weeks away. So I think everyone's starting to still get.
Let's all support that team from the Faroe Islands. That is still alive in the Champions League. It actually has a 2-1 lead going into its second leg there. That would be quite the story. That would be quite the story if they were to make the group stage. They've still got to navigate a second leg and another tie. Presumably that'll be against Galatasaray if they were to get through that. But that's a kind of a neat story if you want to go around the globe and look into that.
Yeah, there's some good teams. It's interesting when you kind of skip through those games, but there's some pretty good teams that play in that qualification. So Europe, even the Europa League qualification. You got some good teams left. So yeah, it's always interesting. If it's on TV, I'll watch it. So, but any other final thoughts here before we kind of wrap up?
Yeah.
No. All right.
I'll edit that part out.
All right. Remember to subscribe, leave comments. It helps us, get into that algorithm. We want to try to jump up as far as we can here. We're trying to, boost up We know everybody kind of is really supportive, during our last run and our new run. We had so many people listening and watching and commenting on Twitter and everywhere else. So, it's very appreciative. So make sure you keep doing that. Please tell your friends about the show. Follow us on Twitter or X, whatever you call it, Box to Box FTBALL, because they only allow you 15 letters. They changed the app so much, just let you put whatever you want on there. Follow us on Instagram, Box to Box Football Pod. And we're going to be back on Friday morning with a preview of the weekend. There's some really, really good matches this weekend. So make sure you're back listening to us. So for everybody here, I want to thank you, and we will see you again on Friday.